There is a particular kind of silence that unsettles people. Not dramatic silence. Not grief. Not catastrophe. Just stillness. A conversation that pauses a second too long. An empty room at night. A phone that remains untouched. And suddenly, something feels wrong. As if the absence of noise means something is missing. But what exactly are we afraid of? Why does the simple removal of sound create unease? Perhaps silence does not create anxiety. Perhaps it reveals it. And maybe the real question is, what surfaces when nothing is distracting you? Modern life rarely allows stillness. Notifications punctuate our thoughts. Music fills empty spaces. Scrolling replaces boredom. Conversations overlap. Noise has become the default setting of existence. We are not used to gaps. When there is no input, no stimulation, no interruption, there is nothing to buffer us from ourselves. And without buffering, there is exposure. It is not silence that feels threatening. It is the sudden encounter with unfiltered consciousness. So consider this gently. If external noise disappeared for a day, would you feel calm or restless? When stimulation fades, something begins to move underneath. Unfinished thoughts, unanswered questions, lingering tension in the body, old emotions that never fully dissolved. Silence acts like a clearing. And in that clearing, what was hidden becomes visible. Most people do not fear quiet itself. They fear the backlog of what they have postponed. Without music, there is memory. Without conversation, there is reflection. Without distraction, there is dialogue with oneself. And that dialogue can feel intense because it is honest. So ask yourself, what thoughts do you avoid by staying busy? In social settings, silence carries a different tension. A pause in conversation can feel like failure. A delayed response can feel like rejection. A moment of stillness can feel like exposure. Why? Because social identity depends on signals. Talking signals competence. Humor signals ease. Speed signals intelligence. When those signals disappear, performance disappears. And when performance disappears, the ego stands unshielded. Silence removes the stage. You are no longer demonstrating who you are. You are simply there. And for many, simply being feels insufficient. So reflect. If you stopped performing for a moment, who would you feel yourself becoming? Noise reassures us that we exist in other people's awareness. Messages, replies, attention, validation. They serve as evidence of relevance. But silence removes that evidence. No reaction, no response, no acknowledgement. And in that gap, an unsettling question appears. If no one is reacting to me, do I still matter? When no one is watching, who am I? For a mind conditioned by constant feedback, that question feels destabilizing. Not because it has no answer, but because it requires internal grounding. So consider quietly. Do you know who you are when no one is responding to you? There is also something physiological at play. When activity slows, the nervous system shifts. For someone accustomed to constant stimulation, that shift can feel unfamiliar. And unfamiliar often feels unsafe. Not because it is dangerous, but because it breaks pattern. The body says, something has changed. And the mind interprets that change as threat. But what if stillness is not danger? Only unfamiliar territory? Could discomfort simply mean you have not practiced being still? For certain individuals, silence feels different. It feels clarifying. In the absence of external input, patterns become visible. Emotions become easier to trace. Motives become easier to understand. The noise of the world fades, and the structure of thought becomes sharper. But this comfort requires something rare, a stable relationship with oneself, because silence magnifies what already exists. If the inner landscape is chaotic, silence amplifies chaos. If it is grounded, silence deepens clarity. So perhaps the difference is not silence itself, but how familiar you are with your own interior world. Do you trust what you will find when you are alone with your thoughts? Observe any group conversation. Notice how quickly someone fills a gap. A joke, a comment, a question. Silence is treated like an error to be corrected. Why do we rush to erase it? Because quiet creates space, and space invites evaluation. In a pause, others might judge. In a pause, uncertainty lingers. In a pause, attention sharpens. Noise smooths over vulnerability. Silence highlights it. So ask yourself, what are you protecting when you rush to fill a gap? It takes a particular kind of strength to remain silent, to let a pause breathe, to respond slowly, to allow a room to settle, because in that pause, you are not proving anything. You are not performing intelligence. You are not signaling confidence. You are not competing for attention. You are simply present. And presence, without performance, can feel raw, but it can also feel powerful. What would happen if you allowed silence to exist without fixing it? When silence is consistently avoided, introspection is delayed. When introspection is delayed, clarity is postponed. Life becomes reactive, emotionally impulsive, driven by external stimulus rather than internal understanding. Without quiet moments, there is no examination of patterns. Without examination, there is repetition. And repetition without awareness becomes identity. So reflect honestly. What parts of your life continue simply because you never pause long enough to question them? There is a subtle advantage to being comfortable in silence. You are less pressured by urgency, less manipulated by noise, less reactive to emotional shifts. You can observe before responding, and observation creates distance. Distance creates clarity. Clarity changes outcomes. The person who does not panic in a pause often holds more influence than the one who speaks constantly, because calm creates contrast, and contrast draws attention. So ask yourself, do you control silence or does silence control you? Most people fear silence because it removes distraction. It reveals unfinished thoughts, unprotected ego, uncertain identity. But silence is not an enemy. It is a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable, only when we are unprepared to look. The real question is not whether you can tolerate quiet. The real question is, what might you discover if you stop running from it